For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, I rise to seek to speak out of order for 1 minute for the purposes of asking the Majority Leader as to the schedule for the rest of the evening.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I thank you, and I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, the Majority Leader.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. First, I want the members to understand the context in which we find ourselves. I have indicated, and I've had discussions with both Mr. Boehner and Mr. Cantor and Mr. Lewis with reference to the appropriation bills that none of us like the omnibus appropriation bills. In order to pass appropriation bills individually, you have to take appropriately significant time. But if you take so much time that you can't possibly get them done, then you are left at the end of the day with an omnibus appropriation bill, which nobody likes. In discussions with Mr. Boehner and Mr. Cantor and Mr. Lewis, Mr. Obey and I have tried to come to an agreement on time constraints. There was a discussion on the floor during the course of the rule between Mr. Obey and Mr. Lewis with respect to time constraints, and at that point in time that was not possible. Subsequent to that, there were further discussions between Mr. Obey and Mr. Lewis in which there seemed to be some progress perhaps that was possible. As a result, we proceeded with the pre-printing requirement that I know some people felt was an unnecessary constraint, but it is, after all, the opportunity to give notice to members what amendments can be anticipated. But I know that I've discussed it on your side of the aisle. You felt that was an imposition. We felt it was an open rule because the amendments were not specified. Notwithstanding that disagreement, there were 127 total amendments. One amendment just now that Mr. Schock, my good friend, he and I have a good relationship. We've traveled together. I think he's a good member. Offered. We accepted. Notwithstanding that, it took 20 minutes of debate and was going to be subject to a vote. Now, if you multiply, say 25, we had a 15-minute vote. If you multiply that by 127, you come to a pretty high number, making it impossible for us to complete, in my view, the appropriation process by the end of July. If we don't complete it by the end of July, frankly, we won't have the opportunity to conference with the Senate, and therefore would not be able to complete the process in a timely fashion. I don't know whether that's the objective of some, but it is certainly not my objective. As a result, I was not here, but Mr. Obey felt it necessary for us to then go to the Rules Committee for the purposes of constraining time so that in a body of 435 people in which everybody has an opportunity to do 5 minutes and then perhaps even get yielded some additional time from somebody else who takes 5 minutes, it would be impossible to complete 10 amendments, much less 127 amendments, in a time frame that we agreed to in a unanimous consent request in 2006 and 2005. In fact, on this bill, the average number of amendments that were offered when you were in the majority was 30. The average number. High of 46, and in 2004, 16 amendments were offered, 10 Republicans and 6 Democrats. In other words, your bill, you offered more amendments to your bill than we offered to your bill. We would like to proceed in a fashion that is reasonable, that provides for opportunities for amendments to be offered, but we also believe that it is our responsibility to assure that the appropriation process is completed. So when the gentleman asked me when Mr. Obey asked the committee rise, it was at that point in time the intention to go to the Rules Committee to provide for amendments in order. Not all 127 amendments. I can't predict how many amendments. There are a lot of duplications in that. And to provide for, however, time constraints within which we can do our business. We do not think that's unreasonable, and we certainly don't think it's unfair. I will tell you that in 2007, we proceeded for 10 bills without time constraints, and from our perspective, we thought we had an agreement that we would use the same time that we gave to you in 2006 when you were in the majority and were controlling. We gave to Mr. Lewis. Notwithstanding that, we believe we went at least 53 hours over time. That is 53 hours longer than the unanimous consent constraints that we gave to you when you were in the majority and we were in the minority. As you know, the last two bills were very contentious because we did, in fact, pursue them under a rule. I want to say to the members, particularly who are new, that while appropriation bills have historically been open, they have historically not taken, as a matter of fact, some of the biggest bills have taken some of the shortest times, the Labor Health Bill and the Defense Bill. I've served on the Appropriations Committee from 1983 until I became Majority Leader 2.5 years ago. So I'm fairly familiar with the procedures under which we operate. So I tell my friend, the Republican whip, that the reason for rising was to give us the opportunity to go to the committee, the Rules Committee, and to provide for, as I said, time constraints in which we can effectively complete this bill. I want to say people are looking at it. We did not expect to have votes. We had votes. Your side believed that we ought to have votes, and so we had a vote to rise. But we have made efforts to try to reach agreement to provide a process in which we could complete the appropriation bills. Very frankly, we think that in years past, there have been a lot of amendments that have been offered, not for the purpose of the substance of the amendment, but for the purpose of simply delaying the ability to get our work done. That may be, we've been in the minority ourselves. We understand the frustration that exists, but my responsibility as the Majority Leader and the manager of this floor is to provide for the completion of our appropriations process one at a time so that we can consider them on their merits and then hopefully pass them individually, have them signed, and that would be my hope to have them signed before the beginning of the fiscal year. That's our thought and plan. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Madam Speaker, I would first of all respond to speak to the issue of the 127 amendments having been filed. And I think that it's certainly a result of, and perhaps the unintended consequences of imposing a pre-printing requirement. And as the gentleman and I have discussed, many of our members felt it necessary to pre-file their amendments to preserve their right to proffer an amendment without necessarily having the intention of following through with offering that amendment. There are several amendments that are duplicative. There are many amendments that our members have already said that they would not offer. So I would say to the gentleman, it is hard for us on this side of the aisle to stand here and accept the notion that somehow 30 minutes into the debate, on page 2 of line 7 of the bill, in discussion of the first Republican amendment, that was where you drew the line and decided that the tactics by us were going to be dilatory. It certainly seems to me, I would say to the gentleman, with all due respect, that there was some preconceived notion that this was the direction in which the majority was going to head regardless. And I furthermore, Madam Speaker, say to the gentleman, it was our intention, and the gentleman and I have spoken about this, it is our intention to practice some good faith and to ask the majority to engage with us, to allow our members to come to the floor to deliberate in the context of the only constitutional duty of this body, which is the expenditure of taxpayer dollars, to allow our voice to be heard. I hardly think, Madam Speaker, that the decision to close this process after 30 minutes, to close this process after just the first Republican amendment, is it all being made, and this decision, is it all being made in good faith? So I ask the gentleman again, what is it, what is the thinking of the majority here? The first appropriations bill, the first Republican amendment, how is it that we can expect good faith debate? Our members complied with your rule, unprecedented. The gentleman speaks to prior years and the number of amendments that came up on this bill and others. He knows as well as I that the pre-printing requirement was not in place. This is the unintended consequence of a pre-printing requirement, the 127 amendments. We have had that discussion. There will not be discussion and debate and votes asked for 127 amendments. So we stand here in good faith and want to engage with the members on your side of the aisle. So I ask the gentleman, what is it? What is the intention tonight? To go back to rules? How is it that our members who've already been told their amendment will be accepted, now how should they proceed? And I yield to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Let me reiterate what the gentleman knows to be the case. He and I have discussed this matter on at least 3 different occasions. They were, I think, friendly discussions. The gentleman indicated that he did not believe an agreement was possible on the time constraints. Mr. Boehner indicated that to me as well, so that it's not as if we haven't had significant discussions about this. You also, in fairness, did indicate to me that the pre-printing requirement would be something that your side would take umbrage at. Mr. Obey, I think correctly, said both sides like notice of actions that are to be taken on the floor. In fact, when we take notice, when we do less than 24 hours, you rightfully believe that's inappropriate, and I agree with you on that, and we try to do that. Sometimes we don't make it. But the fact is that this is not as if we haven't had some discussions over at least the last 2 months about this issue. From my perspective, I don't want to speak for Mr. Obey, who has spoken with Mr. Lewis as well, but over the last 2 months, I have seen nothing that indicated to me that time constraints would be agreeable to your side of the aisle. Not from you, not from Mr. Boehner, not from anybody else, not from Mr. Lewis, who on this floor just hours ago indicated that there would not be any time agreements possible. So in that context, I am in a position where if that's the case, and you may well be correct, 127 wouldn't be offered. But very frankly, our experience in 2007, now in 2008, the appropriation process was attenuated, as you know. It upset you and disappointed me that we didn't have bills. The reasons for that obviously dealt with mainly the Appropriations Committee fighting about energy, as you know. One can blame one another for that, but in any event, it didn't go forward. Nobody was pleased that we didn't consider the bills individually, and we ended up, as you well know, earlier this year, doing an omnibus appropriation bill. We did omnibus appropriation bills frequently when you were in charge of the House as well. Neither side liked that then or when we did it. So I tell my friend the intention is going to be to try to construct timeframes, and we'll be glad to have further discussions with you on those, which will allow for these 12 bills to be done in the time available to us between now and July 30th. Because if we don't get them done, I guarantee you that when we get back in September with 21 days left to go, we will not be able to conference these bills and get them done. That is a practical matter for those of you who are new. I will tell you that. For those of you who have been here, you understand that's the case.
I thank the gentleman. Madam Speaker, I would respond, first of all, to the suggestion that the discussions that we've had and others over the last 2 months as to whether an agreement was possible, frankly, is unprecedented, because in years past, in the appropriations process, time agreements were arrived at once the number of amendments were known. and we worked out the agreements, and debate ensued thereunder. We did not know prior to the deadline and the cutoff of pre-printing requirements as to how many amendments there would be. So we do know now how many amendments there would be. But again, Madam Speaker, I say what sticks with us and not very well is your decision to cut debate off on page 2, line 7 of the bill after the first Republican amendment. Madam Speaker, again, with all due respect, that does not speak in good faith about the majority's intention to allow us the opportunity to speak to the issues surrounding the expenditure of taxpayer dollars. That is not good faith. We stand here in good faith, as the gentleman and I have discussed prior, and we want the opportunity to show you that we can conduct debate in good faith, deliberate on the people's business, and not be shut out summarily. And it is very hard, again, Madam Speaker, for us to accept that the majority had any intention of allowing debate if we shut it off after 30 minutes and the first Republican amendment. So I say to the gentleman, we stand here and we ask you to allow us to proceed this evening, allow us to demonstrate good faith, so that then the majority can then match that good faith and we can proceed in this House in normal course in the appropriations process, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. There being no pending question under Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess subject to the call of the Chair.